Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jill Nogaris, and I'm the English coordinator here at the Virginia Department of Education. I am joined today by my colleagues in the Department of Learning, Carmen Curick, our elementary English and reading specialist, and Colleen Cassida, our middle school English specialist. Also joining us today are our counterparts in the Office of Student Assessment. We have Chris Tessera, who will be joining us from the assessment side, and then supporting through the chat for any questions that may arise as you're thinking and joining us and just brainstorming this afternoon. We have Catherine Ringley, Lauren Zielinski, and Melody Bushley. So I just want to start by thanking you all for taking the time to join us this afternoon. We know that time is extremely precious these days, and we are excited that you decided to spend an hour with us. Just wanted to let you know we are using the chat feature today, so if you have any questions that come up that you'd like to ask, please make sure that you use the chat feature. If you could please, from the drop-down menu, if you switch it over from all panelists to all attendees, then everyone can see your question and then everyone can see the response. So your question might help support one of your colleagues who's also listening in today. So if you have a question, please put that there. Before we start, I just also want to say that this is being recorded, and we are going to post the recording of the webinar, the PowerPoint presentation, and the supporting documents on our Assessment Supports Literacy webinar webpage, where the documents and materials will remain for your use all year long. So just know that if for whatever reason you are unable to join us today or have to hop off early or whatever, you will receive all of these materials because they'll be housed on that website. And again, the same goes for the 3rd, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and end of course presentations that we will be doing over the next few days. So all of the materials will be posted, and you will get a copy of this because you'll be able to have access to it on our site. So just to kind of introduce this, just want to bring you back at the beginning of June. Governor Northam announced that we could have a phased reopening plan for Virginia schools. As you know, last year we were in an emergency closure of schools. So the schools were closed. But now that we have introduced this phased reopening plan, schools are open in a variety of ways. So to support this movement, Dr. Lane offered a guidance document that's called Recover, Redesign, Restart 2020, which offers a lot of guidance and support and encouragements for school divisions as they make their plans to instructionally support students and learning and teachers as we move through this year. So when we're thinking about instruction, we are thinking about the fact that there is a difference between last year and this year. Last year, when schools were closed, we kind of paused instruction for most students and really worked on reviewing and supporting skills that students already had practice with to kind of make sure that everybody had the same access to learning and material for everyone. But now that we are moved into our reopening plan, we are looking at new instruction for students. So we're thinking about implementing authentic learning experiences and what it should look like and how we help prepare students for the real world, but then also make informed choices, bridge some of those skill gaps, enhance that critical thinking, improve creativity, increase engagement, and help them build these 21st century skills. So those are kind of, you know, the pillars of the authentic learning experiences that you'll find in the Recover, Redesign, Restart 2020 document. But we're also kind of thinking about how with that school closure last year and we lost 10 weeks of instruction, we have to think about how we can fold and support and scaffold for students new learning that can fold in those missing pieces so that we can continue on a path for students and continue on their learning and growth experiences while also kind of recovering and making up some of that missed learning. So just to give you some background on this support presentation that we have here, last year, along with the Office of Student Assessment, we all got together and interviewed a variety of schools from all over the Commonwealth, elementary, middle, and high schools, about what they were doing where they found success and improvement on their standards of learning reading SOL scores. And we asked all these questions, we interviewed them, collected materials, and then we put together some support webinar to share some of the advice that was offered from those school divisions, which we have linked here for you. So you'll be able to refer to that if you're interested. But basically, in addition to those best practices that they recommended that they find are supporting instruction in their school divisions, we came up with this PowerPoint to provide specific examples of standards of learning content and the progression of reading skills that are in the 2017 standards of learning. Please note that the question stems and questions that we provide in here are not meant to mimic SOL test questions. Instead, they are to provide you with a variety of ways of addressing skills as you are working with students. So we might have some new standards in 4th grade or content that was not covered in 4th grade before that is now addressed, and you might be thinking, okay, I understand how to approach that. I know what text I would want to use, but I don't know how I would ask questions about that that would be helpful to students thinking as they're preparing for an SOL test that might be getting at the same kinds of skills. So what we have done here today is to provide you with some instructional supports that show you how you could use text and questions that are aligned to the 2017 standards to get at scaffolding that instruction, again, for those students who need additional support, but also for the students who are sitting in our classrooms who need that extra push and are ready to go beyond. One of the things that we're noticing is that while we were out of school for 10 weeks last year, there are many students who continued on with their studies and are well ahead of their current peers. So what can we do to support and push those students along as well? So just some more background, we need to make sure that we are keeping the content of this presentation in perspective. It's just to be supplemental information to support what you are already doing. And while we are going to hone in on specific skills, we want to make sure that you are understanding that our instructional focus is on the standards as a whole, and we are highlighting certain skills based on the text that we are providing today to show you how you might ask questions. In no way, shape, or form would we be giving students a passage and only asking them questions on fact and opinion. You know, reading is far more comprehensive than that, and we would be asking them all sorts of questions that a text lends itself to. But for the purpose of this presentation and to show you how you might offer questions to your students in a variety of difficulties, we have narrowed down just a few skills to demonstrate what that might look like. So I also want to reiterate that, as I know some school divisions have pacing guides that they follow, while there might be times of the year where we are honing in and working on a specific skill, we never master a skill and just move on. That's just not how English works. We don't spend the month of September on fact and opinion and then never come back to it again. It will be seen in other materials and other articles and other pieces students are reading, and we will always spiral back with a different text to kind of support those students. So again, I really want to make sure that everybody clearly understands that while we have picked out specific skills for this presentation, you wouldn't just teach those skills with a piece of text. And I think when you look at the materials that we've provided and you can kind of go through them yourselves, you will see that we offer a variety of annotations and questions to support that. We're just trying to give you the question stems that might help you scaffold that instruction. And while we are only focusing on a couple of skills here in the 4th grade presentation, I'm also going to encourage you to go back to our overview presentation that was a comprehensive K-12 look, because if you are checking out that presentation, which I'll show you the link to later, you will see that we have set out for you which skills we cover in which of the presentations. So while we might be looking at fact and opinion here, you might see some questions on cause and effect in another grade level presentation that you would like to go and look at those question stems to support instruction in your classroom. So please know that while this model is specific to our 4th grade text, the question stems could be used in other grade levels, and you can look in other grade levels for question support. And as I've kind of already hinted at, the curriculum framework really is your home base for a lot of this, and our material and skills spiral, and they grow and they get more complex and complicated as our students get older. But they are learning about setting in 2nd grade, and they are learning about setting in 12th grade. It's just what they are learning about it and what they need to do with the skill that changes, and the grade level of the text they are reading changes. So our spiral starts really small, but it gets bigger and wider as it goes out and up in the grades, but it always circles back. So as we're going to model for you today, it is incredibly important for you to take the time to look at, if this is 4th grade, to look at those 3rd grade standards of learning and essential skills, and look at 5th grade, because you are going to have students who either because they missed instruction last year and you need to, make up for that this year, or because your students are ahead and need additional supports and opportunities, you're going to need to look ahead. And so we're hopeful that by providing some of these question stems, you will see question stems here that kind of align with some 3rd grade material, but also some 5th grade material, so that you can see how to use that to support your instruction. So we're going to go through a 4-step process today. We're going to talk about selecting authentic text and what that means. You're going to hear over and over again the idea of grade level text, because when we are using text for instructional purposes, we want to model with grade level text. Our students will be assessed using grade level text, and it is far more appropriate to have them read below or above their grade level text when they are doing more of their independent reading. But when we're talking about class instruction, we're talking about grade level text. Then we're going to talk about how to look at the content of that authentic text and the progression of the standards to figure out what we should do and how we should thoughtfully use that text. And then we're going to model with some of the sample question starters, and then provide you and show you some of the instructional resources we have to continue this journey, where you can pull some resources and materials that we have posted to kind of support this effort and continue either with some of these skills or for you to look at some new ones. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Chris, who is going to talk with you about selecting authentic text.
Thank you, Jill, and good afternoon, everybody, and hope everyone can hear me nice and clearly. As Jill reiterated earlier, we're hoping that this provides you an opportunity to maybe learn some new ideas for those teachers that are new. However, for those that are returning or have been teaching language arts for several years, this will be a reaffirmation or, again, another way to get some new ideas. So when selecting a text, of course, it's important to review what is the purpose. Why are you selecting this piece of literature? And when you set the purpose, you can do it a couple different ways. One, you want to identify the skills that will be introduced or reviewed for comprehension when you're looking at a passage. So what are specific identified skills? And then when you select the passage, you need to determine, are those skills currently being introduced or reviewed throughout the set of reading? Is it something that will work? You don't want to teach fact and opinion when, the story has no opinions in it. It's just straight fact, or vice versa. So we want to make sure that you are able to locate examples of the skills that you want to teach to identify your purpose. So if the passage supports the identified purpose, then by all means, you're ready to go. You have your desired skills, and you can use this passage for instruction. If you have other reading comprehension skills that are maybe found in the passage, apart from what you're trying to teach at that particular time, you may want to go back and either A, teach the skills that the text lends itself to, or go ahead and then find another piece of text that might be more supportive of the skills that you want to teach. But at the same time, I would keep that reading selection in my back pocket for when I got to a new set or a different set of skills. Examples of introducing or reviewing skills are not found. Again, you want to make sure you find a passage that you are able to use it. And then again, if not, you can still use that passage, but then you're going to have to change what skills you're teaching to support that purpose. Throughout the grade level authentic passages, we have included annotations or a commentary of how to use those skills. Maybe it's specific discussion points that you can pull out at a specific time, using some guiding questions maybe to help support the introduction of the skills or the review of skills, and then you're able to have those starters with you along the way. So what you're going to see is with the PowerPoint, we'll actually have two annotations. One will be for fiction, one will be for nonfiction. As you can see here, this is our fiction authentic text that we chose. And you'll notice on the right-hand side is where the annotations will be throughout the whole selection. And where it says Vita program, that's Virginia Department of Education. That's just our technology piece. So don't think that this is an outside source. This came directly from the assessment and learning department in collaboration. So a piece that we're going to look at is actually a fiction piece, and it is called The Right Step. And we're going to use this passage to demonstrate certain skills. And again, those skills are in the annotated section as well, and you will see how to tie in those specific ones. What we're going to use the right step for is we're going to support the introduction and review of conflict and resolution, sensory words, and then comparing and contrasting details. And again, as we've said several times, the annotation document will show you where we've pulled out specifics for each one. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Carmen, and she's going to go over the next step with you.
Good afternoon, everybody. So now we will move on to step 2 of examining the content and progression of standards for the skills that were kind of identified that Chris shared a second ago that go along with this passage. So once you have identified a text and noted the features that lend themselves to those certain skills, then you really want to cross-check those skills with the standards and curriculum framework for 4th grade, but not only 4th grade, but for 3rd grade and 5th grade, to make sure that you are looking for the grade before you and the grade that comes after you, so that you can create questions to guide the conversation that are aligned with what the standards are asking. You really want those questions to be accessible to all the learners in your classroom, so approaching questions in a variety of ways is important. So again, it's really important to look at the grade levels before you and after you, so you can create those questions for a variety of learners. So one of the identified skills that Chris shared from this particular text was conflict and resolution. So here you can see the standards from 3, 4, and 5 for the skill and how they kind of change in complexity as students get older. So at 3.5I, identify the conflict and resolution. 4.5F is identify the conflict and resolution. And 5.E is explain the resolution and conflicts. One important thing to note here, and hopefully somewhere else across our time together this afternoon, is it's really important not only to look at the standards, but to look in the curriculum framework at the essential skills section that go along with the standards. There may be some additional essential skills that go along with the standards that are not listed there. So for instance, for this particular one, in 3rd grade, the skill is just as it says above, identify the main conflict and resolution. And in 4th grade, the standard says identify the conflict and resolution, but it also says in the essential skills piece in a poem, section of text, or book. So it's just adding a few more varieties of text that they want students practicing that in. And then in 5th grade, just as it says before, explain the resolution of conflicts. So now we're adding, the plural piece there, and there may be more than one when we get into 5th grade. So just something to think about as you're looking at that. We can't always rely on the standards. The essential frameworks may have some additional information that really can help us get at the complexity of what we really want students talking about during these conversations and discussions that you're having about the text. So we'll move to the next skill that was presented in step 1 was sensory words. So you can see how what we're asking students to do in 5th grade is very dependent on what they're doing in 4th grade. So it's important to review before, especially in a year like the year we are in now, and thinking about any content that may have been missed. How can you scaffold this idea of sensory words in order to still get at the complexity of that 5th grade standard? If you are a 5th grade teacher, but we're talking about 4th grade today, but just something to think about as you go on. And even you think about what we ask really young children to do in elementary school. We're asking them to describe in their writing and talk using descriptive words. So it's all really leading up to this idea of, now why did the author kind of choose this word, and explaining just their purpose and their style and their vocabulary usage. So again, just showing how and they kind of progress as you go through the grade levels. And then we will look at the next one was comparing and contrasting. So in 4.5I, you can see it's compare and contrast details in literary and informational text. And 5.5L is comparing and contrasting details in literary and informational text. So what this standard is really talking about is the idea of getting at paired passages, but also, just as a reminder, this standard shows up in both testing blueprints for 4th grade and 5th grade, but also as a reminder, paired passages themselves may only show up for students in 5th grade. Students in 4th grade are not being tested on paired passages, but they have that standard listed in the blueprint because it is also where the idea of looking at details within a passage comes up. So when you see that in 4th grade, it's just talking about the details within a passage or a text itself. So again, something to think about, and really hitting this idea of examining ideas across texts. And then, I will turn it back over to Chris to move on with, now we know the standards of how to create questions.
Thank you, Carmen. So moving on to step 3, we wanted to provide you with some sample question starters. And again, these are just samples for you. And if you recall, for SOL 4.5F, we have conflict and resolution. So as Jill alluded to earlier, we need to make sure that we're scaffolding our instruction and that reading is actually a spiral. So what you might want to get from your students is first is some of the basics. Do they know what is a conflict? Or what might another word be when the conflict is solved? Then you want to get into your identifiers. So now that they can tell you what a conflict is and what a resolution is, now you want to be specific and have them identify the conflict or the resolution from the text that you're reading. Another part is, what is the main conflict? So maybe there's several conflicts throughout the story, but they need to identify the main conflict. And it might be in a certain paragraph, or it might be in the whole story. And then when you have your paragraphs and you're looking at the conflict, how is it resolved? Most of the times as students are reading and as students get older, the conflict and the resolution are not paragraph 5 and paragraph 6. So students have to go in and search for the information. Another piece is, and this is where you can now incorporate your writing, is not only have them identify the conflict and the resolution, but have them explain it from the text. So have them give specific examples to support their answers from the text. It's that strategy of going back and showing. Don't just tell me, show me. What evidence do you have? And if they're able to write down their answer, then when a multiple choice question comes along, they'll be able to pick out the information that they're correct because they have already know how to go back and look at it for using it to write an answer. Then moving along to the next one, we had sensory words. Now, if you recall, Carmen shared with you, grade 3, there is no formal instruction on sensory words. So this is being introduced for grade 4. So again, with scaffolding, let's start back at the lower end. What are sensory words? What are some words or phrases that appeal to your senses? Okay, explain why sensory words might be used. Can they identify sensory words from the text or maybe from a certain location of the text? Can they explain why the author's using sensory words in a particular piece of text or in a particular area? Can they identify what paragraphs use sensory words? Can they identify what the sensory words are and why they're being used? And then again, incorporate that writing, explain how the words are being used to help them understand. And again, you want them to be able to write down where they found that information in the text and allow them to elaborate on why it's being used. And then the last piece, which is our comparing and contrasting details, I don't think it matters what grade this is. As you know, this is one of those skills that continually spiral, and it's one that constantly is getting beat back in and back in. So again, start off. Can they explain how to compare and contrast details? Do they know what to do? Okay. How are maybe certain characters being contrasted, or a setting, or the plots? What are the different pieces that are being looked at? Can they identify maybe a difference? There's similarities and there's differences between the characters. Where can they find it? Are they able to locate in the text the different pieces? And can they then suggest what they're comparing and contrasting is? The last piece, and again, this is where we can incorporate our writing, is to explain why maybe a particular character would disagree or agree with a particular statement from the text. And again, using details from the text to support their answer will help you to be able to do that informal assessment of, okay, Susie's able to recall this information. She's able to point it out to me in the from the text, and she was able to write it clearly and coherently. Then that young lady probably has comprehended what she's read. So moving on to step 4, I'm going to turn it back over to Carmen now that you've had those sample starter questions. Carmen?
So step 4 is now exploring instructional resources. So after we've listened and talked with students and formed these questions and kind of gained a lot of understanding as to where they are and what they're thinking as they're reading, really diving into some instructional resources to think about what will help address the needs in your classroom. So we today are going to explore some resources that support the example text that Chris provided at the beginning of today's webinar. And all of the VDOE Comprehensive Literacy English Instructional Plans can be accessed at the link that is at the top of this slide. And we are going to explore one in particular in just a minute. So we will go to the next slide. And this is a screenshot of the web page where all the instructional resources are, the comprehensive English resources are housed. And just to kind of share with you a little bit about how they are organized there. They are organized by English strand, but then they are also organized within grade bands. And then you can kind of see off to the side, they are tagged with what standards, what primary standards they are focusing on within that lesson. So you can see a lot of them hit multiple grade levels, which is good because you can use a variety of these instructional resources for multiple grades. So we can look at the one we're going to explore today. So on the screen now, you see a couple of screenshots of what the instructional plans look like. So when you initially open those documents, this is what they will look like, just to illustrate how they are structured. So the goal of these instructional plans is to demonstrate how the 4 strands of English standards can be integrated during instruction. So how can we kind of weave together communication, writing, research, reading all at once, all in one lesson? So at the top of the document are the strands that each instructional plan addresses. the primary strand is always first. We always do have a focus area that we are looking at. And then any additional integrated strands that are woven in are listed next. The next section is essential understandings. So this has any essential skills and any additional understandings that students need to be able to know and do that they hopefully will be able to know and do after completing this instructional plan or after working through this with the teacher. And then the standards, again, really focusing on the idea of integration and that we can hit more than one standard while working through an instructional plan or a unit together. There's lots of ways to integrate the standards together. So the primary standard is listed first, and then any standards that are being reinforced through this instructional plan are listed next. There's also an academic background section that discusses any prerequisite knowledge or vocabulary that students will need in order to be successful with this. So if you have some students you may need to kind of have a little discussion with first to just do some vocabulary planting, or just to talk about some background knowledge or some instruction for maybe the year before that you want to kind of pre-teach a little bit with, that's a good section to look at for anything that might be helpful. And then it's the steps to the actual plan itself. So what is the teacher doing? What are the students doing? And there is no timeline written in any of these instructional plans. We always say some of them could be a mini unit within themselves, and some of them could be done over a couple of days. It just depends on the class, the needs, the teacher. And then at the end, it's any modifications or accommodations that could be made with this lesson to support students. So for example, sentence frames that could be used to help any English learners really get at the complexity of what you're talking about. And then any extensions that you could do. How can you incorporate writing with this? If this is a reading focused lesson, how can you, after they've gone through this instructional plan, how could you kind of create some independent work to go along with what you're working on? So there is a lot of ways to utilize these instructional plans, and a lot of any text that could be used. There are some texts listed, and most of them are all easily accessible and online and linked there for you. But if there is another text that really lends itself that your division has or that your division uses, please feel free to use those as well. So we're going to take a look at the one. We're going to kind of talk briefly about the one that was chosen to go along with this. So with the text that was chosen earlier, that was shared with you earlier, and then the questions about story elements and sensory images and conflict and resolution, the instructional plan that was chosen here, maybe for instance, after listening to the conversation, you had some students who really needed to kind of go back and have some instruction on story elements and plot of a story. So this might, for example, be the one we pull out. So this is story elements, and it addresses the standard for 4.5F. And this instructional plan actually uses paired text. So it has that bonus in there, and it has students discovering what the characters think, say, and do, and how that changes across text. So it really incorporates a lot of those story elements and how they kind of affect the plot, conflict and resolution as they go. And then students are also kind of comparing the text that they're reading to a poem that they will read, discussing some of the details that are similar and some of the details that are different. So a great example of showing the integration of standards, integration of strands, and really showing how a lot of skills lead to other skills in literacy instruction. So now I believe we're going to move on to another text example that Chris will share.
Thank you, Carmen. As you know, our first selection was a piece of fiction. Now we're going to look at a piece of nonfiction. We have chosen an informational text about coconut crabs. And again, this is a nonfiction piece. And again, you can either A, select a piece of literature and decide what skills lend itself to that piece of literature, or take a set of skills and then read or look for a specific piece of literature to help support those skills. As with the fiction piece, the right step, we have an annotated Word document that goes along with this that you'll be able to see how we pulled out each of the different skills. And what we have done, I don't know, I've been in education for over 20 years. Author's purpose was a bugaboo 20 years ago, and it still is today. So we're going to look at author's purpose. We're going to look at summarizing supporting details, and then we're also going to talk about fact and opinion. And again, in the annotated Word document, these skills are the ones that we focused in on and pulled out. But as Jill and Carmen have reiterated over and over, there are, of course, other skills, but these are the three that we're going to focus in on. So I'm going to turn it back over to Carmen to go over the next step with you.
So again, we're back to step 2. So Chris shared this nonfiction piece of text. So some of the identified skills. Now we will then go and cross-check with the curriculum framework and standards. And this one, it happens to be author's purpose, like he shared before, the first one. So again, something to think about as you are looking through the framework. So in 3rd grade and 4th grade, it's very similar. The standards are very similar. And I'll read kind of what the essential skills say so that you can see how it's different from what the standard says to the essential skills. But identify the author's purpose for writing, which may include to provide information, to explain a process, or to persuade. And so that's in 3rd grade. And then in 4th grade, explain author's purpose for writing, which may include providing information, explaining a process, or persuading an audience. So again, really thinking about the difference between A, identify, and then B, explain from 3rd to 4th, but also thinking about those additional details that we learned from reading the essential skills section of the curriculum framework too. So just 2 different things to think about. They might provide some additional information there. And then also another thing to think about when thinking about these standards is really the idea of we talk about, is it to explain a process or to persuade, but really hitting the complexity of what it's getting at in your classroom discussions to really think about to persuade what is it that we're persuading? Not really just kind of identifying that word, but really in 4th grade, we're really explaining that. So just saying it's persuading or just saying it's explaining a process doesn't really kind of help to explain the author's purpose. So just kind of, we can use those words in our explanation, but just something to think about as you're really kind of diving in deep with text with students in this standard. And then in 5th grade, it kind of combines all of those skills and standards to use this to locate information. We're supporting opinions, inferences, conclusions. In 5th grade, we're also getting at text structures and different ways to organize text, and that also has to do with an author's purpose. So really in 5th grade, we're combining a lot of those ideas to kind of support opinions, inferences, and draw conclusions. So the next skill that was shared that kind of that this text lent itself to is summarizing information. So you can see the different standards there: summarizing information found in nonfiction text, summarizing supporting details, and summarizing supporting details. But then also just to share a couple additional essential skills from the curriculum framework. So in 4th grade, it's identify the main idea and summarize supporting details. So you're kind of doing both of those things together. And then in 5th grade, it's determine the main idea of a text and summarize supporting key details. So just some additional essential skills to make sure that you're looking at as you go forward. And then the last one, last but not least, and probably not the only skill that could be addressed with this text, but the one identified was fact and opinion. So you can see in 3rd grade, we know when we talk about opinion, children have opinions for a very long time before they get to 4th and 5th grade, but and they're writing about their own opinions, but really in 4th grade is when they're really looking at opinions in text and really kind of differentiating those. So in 4th grade, we're distinguishing fact and opinion, really looking at those different features of what is the feature, what is the distinguishing feature of a fact, and what are those distinguishing features of an opinion. And then in 5th grade, really learning how to differentiate between the two. So I think now Chris will kind of share, now we take that next step forward to look at some questions that would match these standards.
Thank you, Carmen. And again, looking at our questions, we want to be able to scaffold them. So with SOL 4.6b, what does the author want us to know about the text? You know, why did the author write the text? What was he she most likely trying to teach us, maybe it is something specific that we need to learn. Again, what is the purpose maybe of a specific part of the text, not just the whole text in itself. Maybe it's a particular section of the text. And then why did the author include this information? And again, you can look at the whole text or you can look at specific pieces. A lot of nonfiction writing is broken up into sections already. So again, you might want to focus in on just one particular section. You would also maybe look at, what did the author, and it might be a particular technique, did they ask a question? Are they using figurative language? Is it descriptive language? And then in the location, what are they trying to say? So can they pinpoint in the text where a piece of maybe figurative language is used or why it's being used? And then the author's use of, and again, maybe it's a particular phrase, maybe it's a particular word or set of words that might suggest what that statement is about. And then again, as we said earlier, we want to make sure we get some writing into it. So not only can they explain the purpose of the particular piece of text, but can they use specific examples from the text to support your answer? As Carmen said earlier, if the author is trying to persuade, what in the text lends itself to say, hey, the author is trying to persuade? What clue words, or maybe there's specific language that is used that will, in fact, solidify what the author is doing. And again, the student is able to recall that. Then when we're looking at the summary of supporting details, again, what question is being answered? So actually making it the reverse in the piece of text. Which detail should not be included in a summary? It's very hard for a child to take a piece of text and say, okay, summarize that in 2 sentences. So, or in the reverse, which detail maybe is not needed in the summary? Which paragraph answers, again, a particular question that you're going to ask? And again, you would want to have these questions pretty thought out. And again, the author included, if it's a specific detail, why did the author include that specific detail from the text? What are they trying to show? And again, if we can have them explain why adding that particular detail or details supports the specific piece in the text. And again, if kids are able to not only identify these specific details, but able to write it down, maybe like in a summary, maybe a summary paragraph, or listing some important things that should be included in a summary. If they're able to do that, then they should be able to pinpoint specific examples later on. And then, as Carmen was sharing earlier with fact and opinion, if anyone has a child, we all know our children have their own opinions, but fourth grade is where they really start to distinguish between a fact and opinion in literature. Which sentence from the text is a fact, or which sentence is an opinion from the text? How do they know is an opinion? What word or words might be able to help solidify what their answer is? Which statement about, and here's where you can get very creative. Maybe it's about a particular person, maybe it's about an event, whatever is specific in the story, and can they share with you if it's a fact or an opinion? Another example is maybe you want to take 2 sentences, one a fact and one opinion from the text, and have them identify and explain which sentence is a fact and which is an opinion. What details from the text can support their answer? As we know, opinions, there's usually specific words that jump out to say, hey, that's an opinion. Chris is a great presenter. I think it's a fact, but everyone else will say it's an opinion because I used the word great. So again, if children are able to utilize what they've learned and be able to regurgitate it, whether in speaking or writing, then you'll be able to say, hey, they have it or they don't have it. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Carmen to look at the last step for our nonfiction. Carmen, you might be on mute.
Yes, I am talking away to myself. Thank you, though. I appreciate that. So step 4 is really going back to explore the instructional resources and thinking about how they might be useful in your classroom after listening to, the things that students are saying. But and sometimes you might need to explore these to reintroduce something, and sometimes you might need to explore these and pick something that will help you kind of take it the next step further. So it all depends on kind of those anecdotal notes that you are listening for and watching for with your students. So one that lends itself for this nonfiction passage especially is using details to determine the main idea. And this lesson was written for grades 3 through 5, so it can really be adapted for students in grades 3 through 5. But it really takes them through the process of determining what the main idea is, really thinking about the topic, examining those details. How do we kind of use those details? And we really have to be able to summarize them in order to kind of gather that main idea. So it really takes them, past that just identifying the main idea stage through kind of how do we summarize those details into determining it. So just something to think about as you may have students that need that or struggle with that. So that's a helpful resource to explore as you go through that. And I think now Jill will close us out and share some resources for you all.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris and Carmen, for your support this afternoon. And just to reiterate a couple of things before we get into resources, as we have talked about over and over and over again, the skills in English language arts spiral. So when you are selecting a text, it is really important that we find a rich, grade level appropriate text and really highlight the skills that are presented in that text. When we go searching for skills and try to find texts that might contain those skills, we often find forced examples that don't lend themselves to good instruction or student practice, especially because there may only be 1 or 2 highlighted within a text. So what we truly want to do is find rich text and then highlight the features and skills that are available in a text. There is never a time on an SOL assessment or other assessments where students are just asked questions about cause and effect. It's never going to happen. It's a comprehensive assessment, and what we're trying to gauge is a student's reading comprehension. So anything that we ask a student to read, we are going to make sure that we are addressing multiple skills, because there should be multiple opportunities to review and introduce and engage with students in a text and have them explore different skills and then hopefully write about them in the future. So please keep in mind that we just want to make sure that the text we are selecting is rich and that we are highlighting all of these opportunities, which is why at the beginning I said that we can't just teach setting in September and think that we are done. A lot of times that setting could impact a character development, which is not something we might be introducing at the beginning of 4th grade, but something we're going to look at later, and we're going to need to come back to setting. So it's more important to find a rich text that we can use that will support students in their understanding of the skills and the standards that are presented in that grade level, and that might also review some of the scaffolded skills from 3rd grade, but then also push them a little bit, because if these are strong, rich texts, they'll be able to start handling some of the 5th grade skills because the text allows and lends itself to it. So just kind of wanted to just remind everybody that if we provide rich text and we really look at what the author did, the author's craft, we're going to be able to assess that student comprehension, because it is going to be so rich in the material that's in it that we'll be able to highlight many attributes for our students. But just to quickly review, we do realize that our website is a little bit cumbersome, and that right now you're working and listening to a collaborative project between 2 offices that have different web pages on the site, and actually multiple web pages within each office on the site. So what we have done is we have gone ahead and created a collection at the end of this PowerPoint and put all of the links from all of these different sites in one location for your ease of use. So that first link at the top is the Virginia Department of Education English site, where you can get information about the standards, the frameworks, the crosswalks, the progression skills, so you can see where different skills are introduced in each of the 4 strands, K-12, and where students may have mastered those. So all of that information is found on that page. And then we've included each of the new blueprints that are aligned to the 2017 standards, because as everyone hopefully is aware by now, the spring assessments for 2021 will all be based on the 2017 standards. This was something that was supposed to happen last year, but with the emergency school closures did not happen. As of right now, we are a go for assessing our students this spring in 2021 on the new standards. So you're going to want to familiarize yourself with these blueprints. Again, remembering what Carmen shared about the 4th grade 4.5I and the idea of details in a text, and not that we are assessing students on paired passages in 4th grade. But I hope one of the takeaways that you have from today is that looking at the blueprint and reading that top level standard isn't enough to really get at what a student may be asked to do. You really need to dig into the essential skills that are in the curriculum framework. So use the blueprint, but then use that as your starting point to dig deeper into the materials. In addition to these, we have the progression charts I just talked about, the framework, the standards, and then we've also included some assessment resources. There's a website specific to computer adaptive testing, because as you know by now, the 4th grade reading SOL test, actually 3rd through 8th grade reading SOL tests, are all computer adaptive. We also have a comparison here between the passage-based computer adaptive test and a traditional test. The English computer adaptive test is not the same as a math computer adapted test. It is passage-based, so you don't get a more difficult or easier question based on how you do question to question, because it's all the questions that are tied to that passage. So it's a little different, and it's important that you understand the differences between a traditional test, a typical CAT test, and that passage-based CAT. So we've included that information for you there. Also, the link to this entire webinar series, where you'll be able to go back. The 3rd grade material is already posted, but if you're interested in looking at 5th or even any of the middle school, you'll be able to look at that series. And again, if you haven't looked at our overarching presentation where we kind of walked through how these webinars would be laid out, you're going to want to check out that presentation that's already posted as well, to kind of give you a guide as to where you might find information. For instance, there is a paired passage demonstration in the 5th grade and in the 8th grade level presentations. But if you are a 4th grade teacher and you only look at 4th grade, you might not see that as something that you can use because it's not in your 4th grade information. So please look at that overarching umbrella presentation for where you might be able to pull additional skills and standards and scaffolded questions for your instruction. And then of course, we've included the Recover, Redesign, and Restart document, as that is guiding many school divisions as they look at their reopening plans for 2020. We have some frequently asked questions about the passage-based CAT test, the SOL practice test items that are available in TestNav 8. I do want to make sure that everybody understands these SOL practice items have been aligned to the 2017 standards of learning, but the purpose is not to give you a bunch of test items, because in all reality, once they are posted there, they are no longer real functioning test items. Their purpose is to allow students to practice TestNav 8 and the technology and functionality of the program. So while there are items there that are aligned to 2017, some of them may even be practice items that you have seen before, because the standard didn't really change, so it's still aligned for 2017. Because again, the purpose is to practice the functionality of the program. Because we've had the 2017 standards of learning around now for a couple of years, we have 2 years of conference presentations made by English teachers from all over the Commonwealth of Virginia, where they have shown and demonstrated time and time again what instruction aligned to the 2017 standards looks like. So I encourage you to click on those links to get material. There's a link here to the English instructional plans that Carmen reviewed with you today. There are, I want to say, close to at least 125 plans there, and some of them could take weeks to do if you were to do everything. And by no means are we telling you you need to do that, but there is so much instructional material there that is aligned to 2017 that we really hope that you take the time to go look at how you might approach some of your instruction using the guidance that's there. And then Superintendent's Memo 249-20 is the reminder that this coming spring's tests will be on the 2017 standards of learning. So that information is there if you wanted to see a copy of that. What you have here is our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions you may have. We are here to support you, and we want you to be successful, and we want your students to be successful. So please feel free, screenshot, take a picture, copy it down, whatever you need to do. Please reach out to us. If you go to the website, our phone numbers are all listed there as well. But we want to stay connected. We want to support you. You all are invited to attend any of the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, or end of course reading presentations. They will all be structured like this, but the skills that are addressed through the annotated texts change because they're based on the text. And so you will see different question stems and different standards of learning addressed. So you are welcome to join us, or at least look at the materials once it has posted so that you can go in and get additional supports beyond the skills that were evident in the text that we used today. So I just want to thank you again for your time. I'm thrilled that so many of you are still with us, and we look forward to working with you this year. And please give us a shout out whenever you need anything. We're happy to help. Thank you so much.